So this is a special episode today. We've got a big Papa here today.
Big Papa. Welcome, Big Papa.
Yeah, thank you.
John.
Thanks for inviting me to your podcast.
Yeah,
Nice
John.
one, John.
Thanks for coming.
You're welcome.
So John, what we normally do is we like to start by understanding people from where they came from and where it all started before we start talking about the here and now. So can you tell, for all the people that don't know, what you was up to growing up?
Yeah, so I probably need to start by saying that, we're talking about something that happened 60 years ago. So, we've got to recollect as we saw it. But my parents were born in Cyprus back in the 30s, and they came to this country in 61. I was born in Cyprus also, came over at four years old. There was 4 children, mum and dad. We came to live in a tenement house in Islington that at the time was occupied by my grandmother. Used to be quite a common thing in the day, that what happened was that family would come and find you a place to live, so you could come over, and then what they'd do, they'd move out. But the tenement house, for people that don't know what tenement house was house in Islington. It had a sort of semi-basement, a ground floor, a first and second floor, and we had the top floor, which today would be a 1-bedroom flat. Mm-hmm. So my mum and dad came over with 4 children, and we lived in a 1-bedroom flat. 3 or 4 years later, they had 2 more children. So there was actually 8 of us living in a 1-bedroom.
Oh wow!
In a 1-bedroom flat. I was 4 at the time, so I was just about school age. So I went to primary school. My parents came from my mum certainly came very much a village life. My dad probably a little bit more educated, but nonetheless, there wasn't a lot of education in our family at the.
And it must have been quite difficult for them to adjust from that kind of lifestyle in Cyprus to the UK. The difference, which could have been better in some ways, but also a completely different dynamic.
I mean, I look back, by the way, and I think how brave it must be for people, and we certainly have had it in the 90s in this country, how brave it is for people to leave behind, other members of the family, their environment, and come to a different country and start all over again.
Massive.
But we've got to put it into context. Mm-hmm. They really didn't have a lot where they...
Yeah, they were coming for a better
life. They were coming for London, at the time...
Opportunity.
It was an opportunity.
Yeah, it was
the streets of London, it was...
Even now, there's lots of opportunities.
So it was certainly an opportunity for them. So there I was, 4 years old. I had an elder sister who was 7, an older brother who was 6, and then a younger sister. I was 4. She'd be 2-ish. Right.
Nice.
So it was a pretty tough sort of world that we arrived in. But
what was one of your favourite childhood memories?
Do you know what? I think it was the freedom to play outside. There was no restrictions.
Yeah.
No matter what age you were, there was no restrictions. But, for me, I suppose, growing up, we had a lot of freedom, but we were very, very poor. And, we lived in that world of, barely having enough food. We had food, but barely enough food. And I certainly didn't like the food that we were offered. So, it was quite tough because coming from, the Cyprus background, it was more, vegetable-based food.
Yep.
And I just hated it. But carrying on the story, I mean, I ended up going to a primary school in Islington. I was 4 at the time. We used to walk to school on our own.
Wow.
So I had my sister who was, as I said, 7. My brother.
Just babies, really.
Yeah. So we were quite young.
Yeah, kids.
And I do recollect, you know, at that primary school, I did have some really, really good times. When you say best times, I do recollect I had some great times because I was one of them guys. I think people took to me as a young.
Yeah, they liked you.
Which changed as I got older, by the way. But I was really quite popular, and I don't know if it's because it was the way it started. So I remember being 4, not speaking the language, being at school and wanting to use the loo, and couldn't tell the teacher, and couldn't tell the teacher that I wanted to use the loo. Not you know, and it wasn't for a wee. Okay.
Yeah.
So I ended up, you know, making a right mess. And I remember the poor teacher who had to clean me up and, you know,
man. Yeah.
and
I mean, 4 years old, right? It's a young age anyway.
So
It was, really.
yeah. So you know, and I loved my primary school. By the way, I was ever so conscientious at school. You know, I got upset when they didn't give us homework. You know, so it was certainly a different world. And teachers took to me. So, you know, I remember at 5 or 6, I was taken to a fair. I remember at, you know, probably 7 or 8, I was taken to the zoo. This was outside of
the school
time.
Oh, okay.
And it wouldn't be allowed today, by the way. You couldn't imagine a teacher taking a child out and spending a day.
Things have changed now, man.
Yeah. So it's very different. So I mean, that was the start. I mean, a little bit about my mum. My mum was a village lady. My dad, a little bit better educated, but he really suffered from depression, so it was really tough, and could never connect with him. You know, Mum gave us all the love that, you know, and probably more than people have. You know, I mean, there was never a time when I felt
she was the bubbly one. Yeah, she was the one.
Never felt disconnected with my mum. Loved her to bits, and still, if I'm honest with you, my mum's been gone 20 years, and still today I probably do get a little bit emotional.
Yeah.
Speaking, you know,
I bet
about her. So my dad, you know, he had to work. Typical, you know, Cypriot traits. You know, he gambled, he drank. Probably womanised, even though we didn't.
The same story, isn't it?
I don't even know if it was like just Cypriot, but anyone that came from a deprived place and then came over here had all of these things readily available that they never had before in their whole entire lives. So some of them saw it as opportunity, some got overwhelmed by it and didn't know how to handle and would drink and get excited. This is amazing, but you know it's just you're just trying things out and you're experimenting. But then if you experiment with the wrong thing and you end up taking a little bit of a taste and liking to it, that can lead you down a very dark. You get sucked in. So
I suppose the worst thing about it with my, you know, mum and dad. My dad, I'm not really sure that he really loved my mother. It was more we had a lot of children. We had to do the thing, so they carried on. And
it's just a routine.
Yeah, and it was difficult because my dad didn't treat my mother very well, so therefore we took a little bit of a disliking to him, no matter how hard he worked, because he did work hard.
Yeah.
I remember there were times when I went to, you know, to work with him. I must have been about 7 or 8. He used to do steel fabrication, like, you know, making trolleys for Tesco, you know,
cool. Okay.
that sort of thing.
Yeah,
okay. And quite often he'd stay there and sleep on the job. He'd stay there.
So he was on it.
He, you know, he could work really, really hard.
Yeah.
So, you know, and I remember a few times, at different times, he took the children along to sort of keep him company and help. So, but all around that sort of age. So, primary school was absolutely fantastic. I didn't realise it, but I was probably quite bright when I was younger. And I did the 11 plus, and I think I did really well. And I went to
the 11 plus.
yeah.
What is it?
I think 11
But,
plus exists today, doesn't it?
I don't know, man.
What is it, like a
Like,
form of GCSE?
Yeah, it was a form of, how you measure somebody's academic ability.
Okay, yeah.
At
Like
11
SATs.
years old.
11 sats.
At 11 years old. So
Yeah.
comprehensive schools were just coming into being. So comprehensive schools, when I was young, it was a grammar school. It was just I don't know what they called normal schools, by the way, right? So, and they created comprehensive schools, and I went to one that hadn't opened long. I was 11 years old. Highbury Grove in Islington. A famous headmaster. He ended up being an MP. A guy called Dr. Rhodes Boyson. Really disciplined environment. Really disciplined environment. And I was in the brighter classes. So you had different streams. You'd have the A stream were the bright guys. The B streams were
the A team,
the
B
average.
team.
And then of course the guys that had learning difficulties and So went to school in Highbury Grove. We had free school meals. The free school meal that I had, by the way, was the best meal of the day. So when I talk about free school meals, by the way, I was saying that it was great, not that
you were loving it.
It was certainly my best meal of the day.
Yeah.
And what I used to do, I used to hope that a friend would invite me to their house in the evening for a meal, because I used to really dislike the food that we had on the table at home. So we got through that. So I enjoyed my schooling until I got to about 13 or 14, and then I became a little bit arrogant. I became quite flippant. Probably thought I was better than I was. Didn't focus.
Became a bit too clever.
The hormones kicked in.
Didn't focus enough. But one of the things that I did do, I worked very hard. We had to work hard because we had nothing. So during the journey, and I would say perhaps even earlier than 11 years old, we were always trying to do a little bit of work to earn some money, or to earn something.
Yeah.
So maybe before 11, I used to see workmen and try and offer them a hand, and some people took it.
Natural hustler.
Yeah, some people took it, by the way, and the payment may have been going to the cafe with them, or I certainly tried taking people shopping to their door, carrying their bags, but quite often people wouldn't pass any money over, so that was almost like a heartbreak. Okay, so and the other thing I remember, we'd run everywhere. So from a fitness perspective, we actually did run everywhere. So it was like,
why would you run everywhere?
Well, from a personal point of view, I just wanted to do it was about running because I could do it quicker, or I had
energy.
Full of
life. Do you think that you see, like, because how hard your dad was working, you think that influenced you a little bit?
Yeah, so it was quite interesting because one of the things that we were, I think, being hungry, you had two choices. You probably worked hard, or you followed suit. I think there's two choices in life. What you do is that you may work in, you may live in deprivation, but you want to try and
always going back round to having a choice.
Yeah, you want to beat that, don't you? You want to say, do you know what? So you can either say, I'm going to join in that world. So therefore, if my dad was unkind to my mum, I would do the same. If my dad's drunk, I would do the same. Or you can say, what I'm going to do, I'm going to learn from this, and rather than be unkind, I'm going to not drink. I'm going to work hard. I'm going to save my money. I'm going to support the family and
break the chains.
And to be fair, my sister, who started work at 16, my brother, all of us, we all contributed to the family. So there wasn't a contribution from parents to us. It was
the other way around.
It was the other way round for as long as until I got married.
And they had pretty much like a little army of children running around the Islington.
They certainly, absolutely. They certainly
making loads of money, bringing loads of money. Yeah, so it's a clever idea. It's a good.
It's a good business model. So we all had jobs after school, by the way.
Sorry.
Did
So
you?
we all had jobs after school.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Maybe from a young age. So my earliest job was working in a fish and chip shop, and you know my recollection, my payment was taking a bag of potatoes home that I carried on my back, and they were quite heavy because it must have been. I think I worked maybe nearly a mile away.
Wow. Yeah.
So I lived in a little place called Bullion Villas, and the shop was not far from King's Cross in the Caledonian Road. So that was my first job, and then had little jobs after school after that. But the next job for 2 or 3 years was working in a Cypriot greengrocers.
Oh, okay.
And Islington was quite an interesting, very diverse.
Was it? It wasn't predominantly Greeks.
Very
mixed.
diverse ethnicity. All so we had lots of black, Caribbean people, African. In fact, we shared our house with both Caribbean and African people.
Nice.
So we had these three
Mix of culture.
And one thing I forgot to mention about the tenement house that we lived in, there wasn't a bathroom.
Okay.
There was one toilet on the ground floor.
Yeah.
That the whole 3 floors shared. So quite tough. There wasn't proper security. So we used to in the day we used to we have to pay for our electricity, and more than once we got robbed. So people would come into the house, go up the stairs, smash open the little box with all the coins and steal them. Yeah.
You sure it wasn't you?
Yeah, definitely wasn't. Definitely wasn't me. So it was in that background.
What? How did they get like? Did you guys just get blamed for stuff like that? Or?
Not really. No, I mean people knew there was
There's always
some
someone
young tearaways.
Yeah.
And people knew who they were, but
they were hungry. People were hungry back then.
They were hungry,
It was different.
and that was a route that we didn't choose.
Yeah. You was trying to help.
Route, which work hard, make some money,
be of service,
pay your own way, and then that's what we did. So very difficult times, and one of the things I sort of do recollect. We moved from that tenement house to a flat in Highbury, where we did have a bathroom. We did share bedrooms, but there was more bedrooms, and so therefore we lived in this house, a 1-bedroom flat, 8 of us. When my sister would have been probably 18 or 19.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So we moved to Highbury when I was 16.
Okay.
So you can imagine how tough it must have been, for her, a 19-year-old girl, in 1 bedroom with 6 other.
Yeah, it's tough.
It
She
must have
needs
been really
that space, isn't it? She's
yeah.
got womanly things going on and whatnot.
It must have been really, really tough. But to be fair, all of us worked hard. I don't think there's anybody that didn't work hard.
Didn't pull their weight.
And we got through it. So we moved to this lovely flat in Highbury.
Mm-hmm.
It was a 4-bedroom flat, and we lived there from when I was 16, which is now 50 years ago.
Whoa.
It was easy walking to school then because I went to Highbury Grove.
Mm-hmm.
We lived in Highbury.
And these were all council properties.
Well, this one was a street property, so it wasn't an estate. Yeah, my dad was offered a house on an estate in Islington. Yeah, my dad was offered a place on an estate in Islington. He wouldn't do it.
No.
He said, "I'm not taking my children to live in that environment." So he wouldn't do it. So we actually stayed in the tenement house for another 2 years because he didn't.
What was a tenement? Was a tenement house much better?
No, it was a lot worse than the estate.
But the area.
But the area, he didn't. This was in Essex Road.
Yeah.
It was an estate called Sickett Court. It had a bad reputation.
Do you think he made
felt
the right
that way.
decision?
Yeah, and he made a decision.
Was that the right decision? Would you looking back at it, or?
I'm not sure. We didn't have a great expectation, so for us, it probably wouldn't have made
Yeah.
It probably wouldn't have made a lot of difference. We still would have been roaming the streets. We still would have been not liking our food, you know.
But it's who you're around though. If you're in that kind of environment, you know, and
where you can either thrive.
Or like if you're in the estate and you know there's a lot of trouble and happening and other, you can get like
you could get led. And
you
to
can
be
get
fair,
led.
yeah. To be fair, we were all you know, we were all led to a degree. But the one driver for me was I didn't want to be what my father was, and that I was clear about.
Yep.
I never had a great relationship with him, right, because he was unkind to my mother. So, you know, and I don't want to go into great detail, but it was it wasn't good at times.
Bit of resentment.
Yeah, so I did resent my dad. He suffered from depression. At that time, of course, depression was something that was a bit of a taboo subject. So how could people deal with a... You know, I remember my dad at Highbury, you know, as I was sort of getting a little bit older, he'd lock himself away in his room and not come out for 3 days. You know, so it was tough. But for me, the driver was I didn't want to remain in that world. So when I could take a job, I took a job. My father did want to educate us, so I give him his due. There was, you know, there were certain things that he did want us to achieve. And maybe, you know, he was quite disciplined, as Mum was. You know, there was no question about that. He certainly wouldn't,
He wasn't having it.
He wasn't having it. And my dad was a very small man, and we accepted it. It was something that... So I can't really remember getting into much...
I think that was probably quite a common thing then as well.
Yeah.
Like there was a big respect thing, and
you
know, and it was like, and a lot of people would look at their dad, and I think that's for most children. Until I think there is a turning point as you kind of start getting older and you start actually having your own thoughts and think, and they don't always align with your dad's. You start maybe challenging a couple of things along that process where you think, well, actually, I know what you're doing there isn't serving you and it's actually hindering you, and therefore, no, I'm going to switch it up. And so...
I mean, one of the things that I was sure about was, and probably to this day, I do respect authority. I mean, you know, I do respect it. And I think, and in some respects, it's really good, and sometimes it's not so good.
Okay.
So yeah, so around 18, I was taking my A-levels. We had a big issue at home. And I felt the only way to really deal with some of that was to, you know, my dad had a big argument with my dad, who was unkind to my mum, and I gave up my A-levels and went and found a job.
Okay.
I went to work in the civil service for the Inland Revenue, and it was my first job, and
proper job.
That was proper job, yeah, and that was, you know, a way of me contributing back to the family. So when we started working, we all contributed, and as a rule, it was about 25% of our wages. It was something.
There was structure, wasn't it?
Yeah, there was something that we created. So my sister, who probably, to be fair to my sister at the time, was probably, you know, and I have a, you know, great admiration for my sister because she started working at 16, obviously a number of years before me. And she was supporting the family at 16.
It's a legend.
So, you know, for me, I love my sister. You know, I love all my family, you know, quite passionately, because, you know, we lived a hard life, and therefore we understood what we all...
Yeah,
where you come from.
Not only that, you was in it together.
So therefore, you know, struggled with, you know, sometimes, but brothers and sisters, they struggle, don't they?
Yeah, it's normal.
You know, I think it's normal. It's normal.
Well, it's normal now, but when you're in a world where actually it's about survival and you've got something far greater to be worried about, you know, as in the modern day,
it's easier.
It's a lot easier to get annoyed with your brother and sister when you've got a roof over your head and a toilet.
It's like luxury problems, isn't it?
Yeah,
First
luxury
world. First
world. So very grateful to my sister, and then my brother went to work, and, you know, so we are grateful for the contribution that they made. So I got my first job. I was happy there. I enjoyed it, and again I did pretty well. Never passed my A-levels, by the way, because I'd left school. I tried to do them in my own time, never really worked. I spent 4 years in the civil service, by the way, and again I was quite successful. I did really well, worked very hard again.
Yeah.
And I did what people don't do in the civil service. I used to do lots of hours, unpaid hours.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
See,
yeah. I did a lot of unpaid hours, and I remember once that one of my colleagues at work got really upset that I was working, hard, and that he felt it was a disadvantage.
Yeah, a bit inadequate kind of thing.
No, well, it was more, if a promotion was going to go along,
It's going to go to you.
that it would go to me, and he did complain.
Yeah, well, they say those who do more than they're worth usually get paid more than they're worth eventually.
Yeah.
You go the extra mile, isn't it?
Yeah, so I do remember that, and I got quite offended by it. I thought, but hold on a minute, I'm trying to get on in life. Why? Let's all do the same.
Don't watch me. Do what you're doing.
And if I'm setting an example, and you want to do some extra work,
do it.
Yeah, no one's stopping you.
Yeah.
You can join in.
Yeah.
No, what he wanted to do was pull you back rather than meet you forward.
Yeah, and I suppose one of the things that I did miss out on, and it is worth going back just a little bit. Before I went to work in the civil service, while I was looking for a job, right, I did take a part-time job, an agency job, and it was working in a room with a number of people, putting letters in envelopes.
Okay.
It was at the time. It was no franking machines, no. So basically we'd put
all
letters
manual,
manual, and I remember, and it's something, and it's something that I carried on for my, I think I used to have these little spongy things that you used to. Yeah.
Bring them back.
It was something that I carried. Yeah, and it was something that I carried on in my life. By the way, the fact that it was a job, I took it quite seriously.
Mm-hmm.
So I used to measure myself, and I've done that most of my life actually. So I'd measure myself, and I'd work out how many letters I could put in an envelope in 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Then in the next 15 minutes, I'd try to
beat it.
To beat it. So for me, no matter what job I did,
it's who you are.
It was.
You just kept challenging yourself.
Yeah, I kept challenging myself, and therefore it wasn't a chore. It was quite easy.
Well, why did you used to? Right, so because you used to find fun out of it, you used to
challenge.
I challenged myself.
It's a challenge.
It was how I was going to get on. It was how I was going to be better.
Yeah,
because if I could do a job better than.
You're growing ultimately. You're not just sitting there blasé or like tedious.
Absolutely, and I think that's where we got the bit that I used to do the extra hours in the civil service. That I could, I could work a little bit more. I could, and I did love it. I did, and I met some interesting people as well while I was. A civil servant. So my job was to go around people's houses. It was in Camden, and we worked for the district valuer's office, which is to do with it's how they work out the rateable values of people's properties.
Okay.
And at the time they were having a revaluation. I don't know if it ever took place or not. So I used to go out on the streets in Camden into people's homes, measuring their property and doing a little survey. And I met some really interesting people. I met Michael Palin, right?
And anyone that don't know who Michael Palin is,
yeah, he was he done the what's it called? He done some travel shows on the television, and he was in Monty Python's.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Monty Python's Flying Circus. I met some really interesting. I went into some fantastic houses in Hampstead, real luxury apartment. So I enjoyed my time.
That was probably quite eye opening for you.
Oh, it was unbelievable.
So
I mean, some of the properties that we went into, and then
so it's something to aspire to.
Yeah. So it was fantastic. Met some lovely people as well. I remember one winter time it was snowing outside. My feet were absolutely sodden. They were wet from the snow, and I remember somebody calling me in and giving me a little glass of sherry to warm up by their fire. No central heating then. We didn't have any central heating probably until I was about, I can't remember, first central heating I suppose I had was when I got married at 20, 27.
Whoa.
You know, heating in my world was a paraffin heater. I don't know if people know what paraffin, but it was a fuel. You know,
they used to have this like fuel inside your house that was pretty much harmful, like quite toxic.
Yeah.
Wow.
And we used to make toast on there, so that was our heating, by the way.
Yeah.
And you know what? I remember. Yeah, I remember times when there was ice inside the windows as opposed to ice outside because paraffin would let out moisture.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and it will condense and ice.
And then it will turn into ice. So yeah, so coming back to the civil service job, I really enjoyed myself. The only thing is I knew that there was a time when I really did get bored. I couldn't see how I was going to succeed being a civil servant, and I thought, do you know what? The best thing I can do is go and learn a trade. Go out there, learn a trade, which meant that if I did work more hours, I could probably get paid for doing private work.
Yeah, you get rewarded for it, for what you do.
You did. So I had an opportunity to be a gas engineer.
Okay, wow.
I had an opportunity to be a carpenter joiner.
Mm-hmm.
I chose a carpentry joinery because it was my best friend's dad's best friend.
So it was a well-recommended individual.
Yeah.
That.
Yeah. So I chose to go and take an apprenticeship. So I was 21. I thought if I don't do it now, I'm never going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So I left the civil service, a little bit heartbroken. I always enjoyed.
Oh, really?
I was.
Kind of closing the chapter, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's a bit sad.
What was interesting though is how you actually saw it, how you saw that situation at that time, and rather than just carry on going through it over it and wasting even more time, you was quite conscious at that time of saying, do you know what, this chapter's a little bit over.
Yeah.
As much as I'm going to miss it, I'm ready for the. And that's
and I was very much about myself then as well. By the way, I wanted to progress in life, and I thought, you know what, I've got to do it. So I did do that, and I went to work with my the acquaintance, and I worked there for about a year. I was doing my apprenticeship. We agreed that I would do it in the evening, so I worked. It was an interesting job, actually, because I was a civil servant and I did some office work. He said to me, I'll tell you what you could do. You can help run my office and you can learn to be a carpenter joiner.
Mm-hmm.
So I used to run the wages, I used to pay people, and I learned how to make
the trade.
Window frames, doors, staircases. And it was interesting, tough, because you were thrown at the deep end and you had to get yourself out of it. And I didn't mind it, but, I used to buy the books to learn how to make things because we weren't taught in the right way. So, I used to teach myself.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So I was there for about a year, and it's where I met my future employer. It was a company called Limbrooks that were based in Tottenham.
Yeah,
They were
Tottenham.
based in Tottenham. And they came to our little joiner's shop. We were based in Tottenham. Just off, is it West Green?
West Green Road.
Is it West Green Road in Tottenham?
Mm-hmm.
And they came along. They wanted a little bit of joinery made. They wanted, I can't remember, I think it was a window, a couple of windows. So we did a little bit of work for them. I was there for a year, and a year later, I was enjoying it. I was loving it, actually. But work got a little bit difficult, and a year later, believe it or not, my boss got into a lot of trouble. Mm-hmm. And
what sort of trouble?
He got into a lot of trouble because him and a couple of his family members, believe it or not, they actually robbed a silver Bullion lorry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I remember,
and obviously got caught.
And got So it was in around that time, the late 70s. We had a few years of the supergrasses, so people would.
That's what you are.
Grass.
Yeah. So people would tell on their acquaintances to get a lighter sentence.
Oh wow! And it was literally called the Supergrass.
They were the Supergrass.
Is that? I didn't even.
Yeah.
Really.
So basically, from memory, again, a long time ago, from memory, this robbery took place. I think it was in East London. It was a silver bullion, and they stole, I think at the time, approximately £1 million worth of silver.
Job.
Especially back then.
Massive job.
Yeah.
Especially back then.
Was
Yeah, worth a lot of
And
money.
we could imagine, we couldn't have imagined that had happened.
Well, yeah, because you was working for these people.
Right.
Yeah, and like you could never tell.
Yeah.
You never know. So how did that affect?
So it was interesting, really, because what happened was that my boss came up to me and he said to me, I'm going to come across some money, and what we're going to do, we're going to invest it in property. And what we're going to do is that we'll probably buy it in your name and you'll have a share.
Oh, really?
Okay.
So try to manoeuvre it as
well.
Yeah,
and that was the way that they were going to clean up.
The dough.
I had no clue, by the way.
Yeah. Wink, wink.
So honestly, I had no clue. And this is, you know, and I was wondering about telling this story, but it probably was worth.
Yeah,
it was probably worth telling because it was quite.
It's very interesting. Yeah. So
interesting.
so what happened?
So how did we find out about it? So he went missing for a little while.
So
we didn't know.
You were still working, and then all of a sudden,
he went missing for a while.
So did you agree with all that as well? What he said, like, no worries, put it for my name and that.
Because I didn't know.
No clue.
I had no clue what was going on.
No
it was going to be what a great opportunity,
at
21, 22, somebody was going to invite you into
Too Good to Be True.
Too good to be true, and you know what they say about too good to be true.
Yeah, it's not.
It normally is.
If it's too good to be true, it normally
is.
It normally is.
So he got nicked.
So we went missing for a little while, and we didn't know where he was, and we didn't have much work. He had a couple of properties that his relative owned that they were going to modernise in Barnet, so we were told to work on site. We went on site, started doing quite a bit of work on these properties. It was getting quite interesting. It taught me more about the building industry, so it was quite interesting. And I remember it was yesterday. His wife coming to these properties and said, "Have you got a minute, John?" Her name was Sonia, by the way. She's of an age, but still. She's still around today, so that's really good. Yeah, God bless her. And she sat me in a little Mini, the old Minis of the time, and told me the story that he'd been taken, they'd done the robbery and got caught, and that
here's a silver bullion.
Well,
nah.
Yeah. So that was that story, and what happened was that then it put me in a little bit of a dilemma. Because we didn't have a lot of work.
Right,
we didn't have a lot of work. Weren't really sure what to do. So anyway, so in my mind, I didn't know what to do. So I had a great idea. I thought I'd ring Lynn Brooks, go and see somebody at Lynn Brooks. And I'd said to them, look, is there any chance? I was trying to muster work.
Yeah.
Right, could you put some work our way? And they said, yeah, we probably could. So they gave us a little bit of work. And then one day I had a knock on the door in our joiner's shop, and one of the directors of the time came to see me to say, look, we'll give you work and we'll keep you going, but we'd like you to come and work for us. We're moving into Enfield, near Enfield town. We've got a small joiner's shop and we'd like you to come along and run it and see how we can make a go of it. My boss wasn't around at the time. I didn't see a future after that. I thought, I don't know where this is going to end.
Yeah.
And even though I was extremely loyal, I just didn't know where it would. I just didn't know, and I had to earn money. I was living with my parents. I told you the story of our life, so for me,
you've got to take action somewhere.
I've got to take action, and the action that I took, I said to Lynn Brooks at the time. This was back in 1979. I said, okay, we have a deal. You help us through this horrible time. I'll come and work for you. Lynn Brooks moved from Tottenham in 1980. From recollection, I think I'm pretty good with my time. My boss came out on bail, and I told him we were leaving. We we left. And when I say we, I was working with a joiner at the time who decided to come with me.
With you as well, yeah.
And we ended up at Lynbrooks in September of 1980. It was a house with a little yard, which was quite common at the time. Builders used to have a little builder's yard and an office, which was normally a house.
What, that you stayed in?
No, it was converted where we
Yeah.
worked. So it was converted into offices.
There's a lot more land back then as well, like where there was.
There was a big
remember-
warehouse by the side, and the offices were, and the joiner shop was within the yard part and warehouse.
Okay.
So we set up a little joiner shop, and again, I loved it. I loved that work. I loved that. I wanted to show people what I could do. So from an apprentice, I was running a joiner shop quite quickly. I was 22. We were made a lot of promises, by the way. So, it was about, come and help us at the joinery shop. We'll make you a director of the joinery shop. We build the joinery shop up, and you could do really well for yourself.
That's good.
But for me, it was more about making an impression.
Yeah, because you had that in you anyway,
Yeah,
isn't
and
it? So you had that from young.
And I think that stuff's only good as long as people
As long as it
deliver,
materialises.
on their word. Because
And it didn't materialise. So
Well,
but I enjoyed it.
well-
I enjoyed working in the joiner's shop.
Yeah.
And
What actually is a joiner shop?
okay, it's where you make window frames, doors.
Okay, you just put in joints together.
You're putting
Okay.
Yeah, so you're making door frames.
Okay.
Yeah. So and I was quite good at it.
It's like all machinery and planting there. I mean, obviously, I don't know what it was like back then,
How
but
much chisel?
No, it was mechanical. It was
Okay.
mechanical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, we had
Yeah.
planers, we had mortise and tenoners. For people that are in the industry, they'll probably
there was a guy that used to work there called Fingers, and you can imagine how he got the nickname because
Yeah, none.
when pretty much when he's cutting things,
Yeah.
and like there was less fingers than there was fingers by the time.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Hardcore, man.
Yeah, so we
Hardcore.
Yeah, honestly,
I
remember
worked in that.
he wasn't very happy. He was a bit grumpy. You can,
yeah.
you can naturally
You can-
understand why.
Absolutely.
But interestingly, this goes back. So just to take you back to, I spoke about the envelopes, didn't I? So
Yeah.
we had a sizable contract in Enfield, and at the time there were wooden windows, and there were Georgian type windows. And I don't know if you know what Georgian type windows are.
Is it like a certain style?
Yeah, so Georgian type windows were with little glazing bars. So you had little
The
glass.
security, the glass where it's like cross it. There's
Oh,
loads
yeah,
of, there's
yeah,
wire.
well,
Yeah,
like, no,
the
oh,
Hammerby
yeah, in schools.
Islington.
Yeah, I know
old
that
schools,
one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what it was like. So we probably
Because
there
the
was a
point
period-
the point of that glass was to keep it intact.
Well, not really. It was just a design, George.
Was it just a design?
It was just a
Right,
design.
Oh, is
so
it? I would have thought it would have been that.
Yeah.
But yeah.
no, it was just
a
a
bit
design.
more
They had it in schools.
Yeah,
They had
yeah,
it
yeah.
sort of everywhere, and we had lots of these windows to make, and it took me back to putting the letters in the envelopes. I used to measure how quickly I could. But I was getting bored again. It was something that I thought to myself, I'm not sure how long I can do this, but I had great desire to always
push.
myself and push other people, of course. So I think I was in the joiner shop for about 4 years, but I did have leadership qualities. My boss saw these leadership qualities and he thought I could do something different. And he asked me if I would begin to manage the joiner shop, but help support the stores.
Okay.
We had a warehouse at the time, and we used to keep materials, and for me it was all about how am I going to better myself, and that, I was always quite obedient, and this goes back to this this authority stuff. I sort of really respected authority, so I struggled to say no. So with the passion for working hard, with saying no, I think I was probably a good employee.
Yeah.
I think it sounds quite like the father thing about you always had the respect there.
Yeah,
And done what? Yeah, it sounds like very closely linked to them situations. So that's regardless of how you felt towards authority, you just generally just got on with it because that was what the deal was.
And I would say that it's probably, my life probably changed working at Lynbrook's because of that, the respect part, that, you know, it was a big issue for me because, you know, I was loyal, didn't want to let anybody down. The boss did look after me, but it wasn't really what I wanted. I mean, what I wanted was to learn a trade, to be able to work hard, maybe go into property, maybe do something different, really push on. But I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have anybody. My dad wasn't in that world of. My dad was surviving his demons. So, you know, as I said earlier, that he suffered from depression. I don't think could really help me a great deal. So I didn't really have anybody to guide me. So the guide that I had was my boss at Lynbrook's.
And Lynbrook's at the time was a multi-million-pound...
Well, not. I suppose when I joined them, they were probably £2 or £3 million back in 1980. So possibly with inflation, you know, you're probably talking about maybe 10, 15 million. You know, certainly 10 million. You know, maybe a bit more. But they became quite a successful firm. And yeah, I do remember a time when I was having a conversation with my boss where I said, look, you know, this isn't really, I can't see myself here long term. You know, I want to go into property. But he said, no, you ain't got to worry. You stick with me.
Yeah, you're good.
And you won't need to. Yeah,
you're good,
you
John.
won't need
you're
all
good,
that.
John. Don't worry.
Yeah,
John.
exactly. And to be fair, I did stay.
Yeah.
And the loyalty grew. He certainly, you know, paid me reasonably well, and I did have security, and therefore it sort of worked.
But
maybe
your value though, you upped your value as who you like. You always put in extra.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? It wasn't just.
And I did then, by the way. So
you earned that. You didn't. It wasn't just given to you. You know?
No. I mean, if I give you an example, when I joined, they said we will pay you a tradesman's salary. From an apprentice, I got a tradesman's salary really quickly.
There you go. It just shows.
But I felt like that I owed him something. I felt that I owed.
Or you wanted to prove to him.
Yeah, no, and that I owed.
You owed because he put.
So what I used to do was to work
the
extra hours and not get paid. You know, he agreed to pay us a certain amount of hours. I would do more. So at the time we were living in Highbury. I worked in Enfield. So again, not easy.
No.
But I was 20, as I said, 22, and my head was telling me that, do you know what? If I want to get on in life, I need to buy my own home. I worked in Enfield. I used to go into the blocks of flats in Enfield, the high-rise blocks of flats.
Still there to this day, isn't they?
And one of the things that sort of I used to walk in, I thought, I don't want to end up here. This is not what I want to do.
Definitely not what
so
you want.
I worked for 7 days a week, possibly from 22 until I met my wife. And even then, for the first year when I met my future wife, I probably worked 7 days a week most of the time.
Solid.
I used to work 5.5 days at Lynbrook's, and then I used to work the other day and a half doing whatever I could to earn some extra money. So when I did meet my future wife, if I was to, I would have the money to put a deposit on a house.
Yeah.
And to be fair, I did achieve that. So when I did meet my wife, I was 26.
Yep.
My wife was 24. In a year, we managed to get married, buy our first home. So it did.
And you funded all of this, so the wedding.
Well, yeah.
Did you have any
with my wife, because what I made. I met my wife. We were introduced, by the way. So it was. We were introduced by my brother-in-law, who knew a relative, and it was sort of a blind date. So I met my wife, and after a couple of, maybe a few weeks even, I thought, you know, she's a really nice lady, and what are you looking for in life? Let's give it a go. I made my mind up quite quickly, and I think my wife did as well.
Yeah.
So I said to her, you know, maybe a month, 2 months into the relationship, I said, do you know what we should do? We should save between us No, the first thing I said to her was, "How much money have you got?"
Yeah.
And she looked at me sheepishly, and she really had no money. If anything, she had a bit of debt because she used to live quite a good life.
Yeah.
You know, at that age, she used to live a good life.
Lavish.
She'd take a taxi to work. I wasn't used to that world. I'd go without.
You were running.
That was the world that I was in. You know, I lived my life the way that I lived my life at home. I had no great expectation of, and to this day, there aren't many things that actually...
You just stayed focused.
Yeah, and there aren't many things that I could say, even though I had really nice cars, I can't say I was motivated by a nice car.
Yeah.
I think I had a nice car because if other people were entitled to it...
It was a byproduct of your success.
Then I certainly was. So, I didn't... Maybe I did get excited by a hi-fi in the day.
Okay.
Yeah. I did get excited by that.
Yeah.
And really, you've got to go a long way before I really got excited. Was when I had, children. That was my... but we'll talk about that a little later.
That's coming.
That's coming. Okay, so...
Yeah.
So we did. I said to my wife, let's start saving. Let's save. At the time, it was £50 each a week.
Mm-hmm.
And I had quite a lot of savings of my own. So in that year, we managed to get a deposit for our house. We paid for our wedding. Our first house was in Palmer's Green. At the time, we paid £40,000 for it back in 1980.
Wow. It was different back then, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. But
all relative in numbers though, because wages. There was probably no 40 grand wage. There was no.
No, I mean my first wage, which was a tradesman's wage at the time. So at the time at 22, it was about £104 a week, which probably by, 4 or 5 years later, it was probably 130 maybe.
Okay.
So it wasn't, but I worked 7 days a week, so that became
probably the bills.
You put the graph
200. It was, and I say to this day that when people say we had it easier because house prices were cheaper, I think there is an element of truth in that. But the reality of it today, you can get mortgages that are more than 25. At the time,
mm-hmm.
you can only get 25%.
Oh,
okay. 25-year mortgages.
25 years mortgages.
Yeah, whereas now you can get
that longer.
You can get 40-year mortgages. Yeah. You can get mortgages until you're 70, 75. So
dynamic has
changed. So it's changed.
It's changed.
I remember
once
talking to a young guy at work. 4 or 5 years ago now, when I was saying how's he getting on, and he said he said to me that it was all right for you
mm-hmm.
because house prices at the time were so much cheaper. And I tried to explain to him that even though it was, you still had to work very, very hard and give up a lot.
Yeah, it's sacrifice. You have to earn it.
Yeah, you had to sacrifice a lot.
Yeah.
And so, going back to my story, we moved into the house in Palmer's Green. I got married, stayed at Limbrook's. We had children 3 or 4 years later. I had a good 3 or 4 years actually, to be fair. It was the only time that we probably could, do things and go out ourselves, and I wasn't paid an enormous amount of money at the time, but my wife was working, so we had a good life for approximately 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I really enjoyed it. Again, we enjoyed our home. We spoilt ourselves, and but never went on holidays very often. So when people talk about we didn't go for a holiday, we went for our honeymoon in '84, and then didn't have a holiday until '87. Okay. When I talk about we didn't have a holiday, we didn't have a holiday.
Yeah,
anywhere.
Yeah, we didn't go anywhere.
Yeah,
we may have had a weekend, but we certainly didn't.
No,
I kept working.
That's the sacrifice, isn't it?
That was definitely a sacrifice.
Yeah.
So we, I stayed at Limbrook's from working in the, from the joiner's shop to leadership. I worked in the I worked in our in our in our stores. I was asked to come and work into the office, where I took an admin manager's role. So I used to run the administration. I used to manage people. I started managing people with no training. I can definitely say
natural.
I can definitely say that through my life, nobody really offered me any training. Whatever training I've had and whatever I've achieved,
It's through life.
it's through life,
Imagine,
life skills.
Yeah.
There's no internet back then, or no YouTube, or no.
Yeah,
But there's a lot to be said through life skills versus somebody that's got a load of qualifications but hasn't got any real hands-on experience.
Yeah.
And that's
Big thing, bro.
you know, so I think
it held me well, by the way. But but it would have been.
there's more growth through that, except for through action. But the problem that you've got is you've got to learn all the painful mistakes rather than having an opportunity to maybe just redirect it or
learn by someone else's mistakes.
I think it was okay for a period of time. I think as you begin to go through life, you do need mentoring. You do need to be trained. You need to look at you need to
it helps.
you need to open that mind, because you get very, very focused, especially people of my generation.
well, you say this anyway. You don't know what you don't know, so
You don't know what you don't know.
So if you're in that peripherals and there's nothing else outside of it, then you just think you're doing what you're doing is right.
Yeah, but like your dad said, it opens your mind, isn't it? Because
if you get the training,
if you get the support,
and the training. So was I narrow-minded? Probably yes. It was about work. It was about how can we deliver for the boss, and he was quite happy.
Yeah.
So why would he want to train us?
Yeah, you're good enough.
We're good enough. We're doing a really good job. So
If it's not broken,
enjoy
don't
it.
fix it.
Yeah.
So I worked in the office as an administrator for a number of years, but in '93 the business started to grow exponentially. Yeah, and my boss, very clever man that he was, I would say that in reality that he was a great businessman, but I would say very manipulative. And he definitely, having that respect for authority, I think he had a big influence in my life.
What, like he misused it, or?
I think we all create that, don't we? You can't blame people for
human nature.
It's human nature, isn't it? So I picked up bits that sometimes I liked. That being successful is really powerful, isn't it?
It is, of course.
And he was successful, and I quite enjoyed it. But in '93, we moved from Enfield Town to Crown Road in Enfield, in EN1, massive big warehouse. And he took a risk in buying the premises, and we used a very small part of it. But we had great growth spurts while I was there, and can't remember the time, but certainly around '97, I'd done really well. I worked really hard. As a business, we made lots of money, and I got involved with everything. There wasn't anything that I didn't get involved with.
Yeah, now you could fully flourish.
I was a buyer. I looked after the vehicles. I really did get involved with.
That was the good thing about being in a smaller business, is you got to see a lot more how a lot of the other cogs turned.
Okay.
So in smaller businesses, they say it's good because you get to become quite dynamic that way.
Okay, yeah, because you're there
exactly.
in the mix.
And you're in the mix of it. In a big corporate company, you're generally doing one specific job and one job only. So generally that makes you become quite good at a specific role.
Specialised.
Yeah. So we moved there, and I was involved. So he came along and he said to me, probably at the right time as well, by the way, because I'll explain that in a minute. But he said to me, look, we've been talking with the board, and we're going to make you if you'd like to join us and become a director, we'd like to have you on board.
Oh, nice.
And that meant an increased salary, and it probably came at the right time because we lived in Palmer's Green. The house, we had 2 children. The house had outgrown us, and we needed to move. Whether it was because, again, we all have this expectation of ourselves, why live in a small house when you can
live in a big one?
Live in a big one.
Yeah, you want more, isn't it? It's nice.
But it was one of the first big risks that I actually took, and maybe it was a bit profound, really. So I sat down trying to work out how we were going to move, and I knew it was going to be really tough. So by him giving me that new role and paying me more money, it probably came at the
Perfect
right
timing.
time. But it came with a lot of pressure, and it starts bringing this sort of podcast into the more modern world. What it did, the pressure of work played a big part in my family life.
Okay.
And I would generally say that I put my work before my family.
Mm-hmm.
Am I proud of that? The answer is not. Is it something that I have to live with and accept? The answer is, of course, yes, because that is what I did. And I can tell you a few, really poor stories, that sit with me today, right? That were really tough. So, one in particular that will, well, there's two or three, but one in particular I think was probably the one that is worth sort of sharing with everybody.
Yeah, not too many.
Yeah. No, but one in particular
let it flow,
is
John,
worth.
let it flow.
No, it's worth sharing. So, George would have been probably 18 months. My daughter, who's 2 years older, would have been 3-ish. They both got chicken pox, as did my wife. And I had work commitments, so I left them at home while I went to work.
And it was like chaos. It was like chicken pox flying everywhere at home.
But what else would you have stayed home if you?
Well, somebody needed to look after them, and my wife wasn't well.
Fair enough. Everyone's ill.
So
everyone's ill.
Everybody was ill.
Yeah.
And I went to work, and I'm thinking to myself, and I look back now, and I think, John, these were things that I definitely shouldn't have.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, they are, by the way.
Yeah.
I mean,
but the balance was a bit.
Yeah, I definitely got that wrong, by the way. So yes, I did well at work, but I think my work-life balance was really poor, and maybe that continued for quite a while. So, we did have children. As every parent, we love our children. So I'm not, I don't think, but you got to spend the time. You got to nurture. You got to, and I can genuinely say that I certainly didn't give up the children the time that I probably should have. Gave them other things.
Yeah.
All that materialistic wealth, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like, and when most people looking on the outside, they'd be thinking, "Oh, he's all right. He's got everything he needs. Yeah. He's got." So
it's just on the outside.
But it's I've referenced this on previous podcasts that it isn't about materialistic wealth. It's about internal wealth.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you've got internal wealth, you can create as much materialistic wealth in the world as you want.
Yeah.
So, and that's the.
Yeah, and by the way, just I definitely got it wrong. There's no point in saying I got it right.
Yeah.
And so today, when I meet younger people who are in business, I do say to them, make sure you get that balance right. That balance right.
Yeah. But at the time, you're only trying to do your best, isn't it? Considering where you came from.
Yeah, I think it was difficult because I was trying to do my best, but I think whether it was the lack of education, maybe the lack of training. So we go back to that. Open your mind. Not have that blinkered approach. Mm-hmm. Maybe that was the.
I think the issue that I see is that you got this kind of past trauma of having absolutely nothing, and you get so engrossed in that is that's all you can see. You can't see a lot of other things.
I think
and we've got a modern day. There's modern day people. Like one of our good friends, a mutual friend that we know, he does exactly the same thing, and he works and works and works, and that balance.
Yeah, and I've so I do speak to people, and so I do try to mentor people in that way because it's not just about that work.
Yeah,
there has to be that work because you influence other people, and if you really do care about your family, of course, you've got to make sure that you
look after
you demonstrate that. So yes, we could buy things, we could give them things, but I wish I'd spent
a bit more time.
A bit more time. So I do miss that. Mm-hmm. Okay, so going back, so we got this promotion. Money was was okay. We moved home. We've built a big house in Winchmore Hill.
You built it.
We didn't build. We built extensions to it. We modernised the house. And I still live in the house, and the house is worth a lot of money. So from that point of view, you could say, well, do you know what? You were quite successful.
Yeah, you done. Yeah,
but as I said to you before,
almost like at what consequence?
Yeah.
And and that's always the thing in life, isn't it? Is that whatever you truly passionately want, it always comes at a cost, doesn't it? And and I can easily talk about this anyway. This situation. So this is a thing that I've dealt with a long time or a while ago now, but. That's a big statement to make, that if you truly want something, it's almost be careful what you wish for at the same time.
Yeah, because
you can have that, but it's always at what cost? Because you might be happy in that moment, but what you essentially have to try and do is look at what you would be like 60, 70, 80 years old and think, who did that affect? How did it affect them? And that's always the fine line, because I've already done stuff like this myself, where you're so passionate about doing what you want to do that it can affect other people.
Yeah, but you're not seeing it.
But you can't see
it.
But
that you had your dad, and you had him kind of as like a role model. So like he was obviously disappearing for a few days and stuff. So he was kind of who you had to base yourself off, because you didn't know no better. So you was always doing better than.
Yeah, that for me, he was the driver in my life. There's no doubt about that. I did not want to be what my dad was.
Exactly. So you was doing.
So, but it doesn't make it right either.
It doesn't.
So you can't go from one extreme to the, to the other.
The pendulum swings.
So obviously. You need to...
Yeah, stop siding with him.
No, but I'm just... because people only do what they're best, isn't it? It's like sometimes you can't be too hard on yourself, because where you come from and where you are...
Yeah.
And, and how George is... The way you've raised George...
I'm not hard on myself.
No.
I just got it wrong.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, so, I'm not being funny. There's some things that I got really right. So, in life, you've got to balance that off.
So,
you can't...
Yeah, well, you could be completely arrogant to any of this and then just be like, I got it 100% right.
Yeah.
But I'm not being funny. You go through life, you're never going to get it right 100% of the time.
You're not, bro. You're not, because you're human, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're human.
I think it's important, though, to be conscious of the fact that you've got it wrong.
Yeah, own it.
Because the more you own it, the more chance you have of doing something about it while we're all still here, right?
Yeah, because how do you feel about that? Like, would you change it or?
Knowing the relationship that I have now, I'm completely okay with it. It's a little bit like it's been a bit of a complete spin, but I'm okay with it now.
Yeah, because I think we probably need to finish the story, George.
Yeah,
don't we, really?
fair enough.
I'll tell you why, because what basically will happen is that we'll see some of the good stuff as well.
Okay.
A little bit more bad.
The contrast.
A little bit more bad, so we're okay with that.
But we need that.
But bad is okay, it's all right.
It's necessary.
I don't live in the past.
No.
I move very quickly, I actually do really move. Sometimes you regret stuff and you wish you did it differently, as I've said to you, and I did a bit more of that, and we'll go into it a little bit, not a lot, but we will go into it. So we had children. Worked at time. It was tough. Went to work. Struggled, lots of pressure, and then in 2011, our business got sold, and it got sold to a corporate company.
Okay.
How much they sell that for?
I mean, at the time, I don't know if it's sensitive information, so I'm not.
Okay.
Yeah. So about for a considerable amount of for millions. Okay.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
For millions.
Big bucks.
Okay. Yeah. So and this firm bought it. Okay. And then I got collared into that corporate world.
So you went with it?
I went with it, yeah. I was an operations director at the time. I moved over into the new job as an operations director with this corporate business.
Yeah.
And I did struggle.
Yeah.
In what sense?
Well, can I put a bit of context?
Yeah.
So I started at Limbrooks at 16. and there was aggression, there was swearing, it was such a like a boisterous.
OK Corral. Would you say OK Corral?
OK Corral.
What's that? Okay, Corral.
Like the westerns, you know.
Yeah, like the Western,
yeah,
swearing.
yeah.
Like it was a bit chaos, and then you got
mental.
this. Yeah, it was a bit of chaos, but it was it all worked, but then you've got the corporate dynamic, which is all order. It's just total order. It's very like risk averse, no swearing, like smile, but you know, you never really knew where you stood. I mean, the good thing about the old world, you knew where you stood very quickly, because if someone didn't like you, they would tell you very quickly. But in the corporate world, it was a more refined way of working.
Yeah, and to be fair, this is a bit, you know, about training. So when I said I've had no formal training, then this is a bit that probably mattered the most.
Okay.
Because as you know, George said that, you know, we worked in that environment, quite tough at times, and I did adjust a bit. I didn't realise I hadn't adjusted enough, because my passion drove me. But I felt if I'm driving myself, I could drive other people, which is quite honourable
Absolutely.
for the business, but they wanted it driven in a different way. I didn't have that training to maybe drive it in that.
You're like a rough diamond, isn't it? That
absolutely.
Just needs to be
we knew
polished.
we knew how to make money. We knew how to, you know, look after people. We were quite we looked
A dynamic
after each other.
team, yeah,
we looked
quite.
after each other. But you know, the world was changing, and I think that is when you need that. You can change, but you may not be changing quickly enough. Okay, so they bought the business in 2011, and by 2019, all hell broke loose, and we parted ways. Okay, it wasn't very nice. We parted ways, and I'd probably leave it at that. But as fortune would have it, George had left 2 years earlier. He'd set up his own business. So when we parted ways, I didn't really want to go and work for anybody else.
No.
I just felt that if I was going to do it, this was the time to work with my son.
Bearing in mind, I've been working with him for 16, and I thought I finally got away. I finally got out, and then bang, the life comes back round and says, "No, you're not out of the woods yet."
Yeah, and you know, I'm not sure what George wanted for himself at the time, but George had left Limbrooks. He set up his own business, and we had conversations around, you know, where do you want to go with it? How big do you want to get? What do you want to do? And
I think what happened for me at that time is I'd been at the same place for 12 years, and I think I needed to go see what was out in the big wide world.
Yeah.
Like all you knew was these few places, and
Yeah, man.
so I think that's what propelled me, and I was generally unhappy there anyway, and I'd excelled in my own path there, and I was just like, do you know what, I want something different for myself. And actually what was interesting is what I did used to think was, if I'm working this hard here, imagine if I did this for myself.
Yeah, you had big aspirations.
Yeah, I think I had so I don't know, it was definitely passed down, maybe through that vegetable soup that you used to have or something like that.
well, you know, at the end of the day, you've got to remember, so I was with a firm, so if you can imagine, I was with a firm from 1980.
80, yeah, till 2019.
To 2000
Yeah, 39 years.
Same firm, you know, almost the same firm, because obviously it was the same firm, but it got taken over.
Yeah,
right?
and then
so
that's massive,
you know,
man.
and during going back to that, you know, the bit, you know, no proper mentoring, no training. You can see how difficult it.
Yeah, it's
probably,
rough. It's rough.
And probably in your earlier years, that's a lot. You could generally get away with that a bit better, but when you start getting into that world where there is a serious amount of pressure and stress going on, like that's like just walking through a minefield and expecting not to stand on, put one foot on the mine. Like that's, do you know what I'm, that becomes very problematic very quickly.
And I still had that enormous drive to get people to do what they should be doing.
Mm-hmm.
Whether I did it in the right way or not, that is, I reflect and I think, maybe there were times when I didn't. And certainly you wouldn't be able to deal with that, get away with it today. I think the world is changing. I think, if we look recently with the Dominic Raab issue, where he left his job because he was being accused of
Bullion.
Bullying and stuff like that. Things change and the world changes, doesn't it? And I recognise that. So I do understand that. And there were conversations that we had in open offices that maybe I shouldn't have had. I have to accept all that.
Yeah.
But we moved on.
Mm-hmm.
George set up his business.
Mm-hmm.
I was available for work, and I wanted to come and work with.
Because you got some quite big offers.
I didn't really pursue it. I did get a sizable offer, but to be honest with you, that isn't. I thought to myself, do you know what? It's probably the time now just to focus on
what really matters.
On what really mattered, because I've missed all that family stuff, didn't I?
Yeah, absolutely. Now it's about making the right, more conscious decisions.
Yeah.
And then making the right choice.
And do you know what? When I first started, I have to say that we did struggle together because I was always a boss, wasn't I?
Yeah.
So you can't change.
Yeah, you can't.
You can't change overnight. And you know what? You don't even recognise it. You actually don't, and maybe to this day, I don't recognise my influence, my passion, because I didn't ever see myself that way. I always felt that I was the guy that everybody would want to like, whether I was pushing them or not. I always felt I was good for them.
Yeah,
but
because you had good intentions, didn't it? And you wanted them you wanted the best out of them, and
I think so.
What I love about now is in our business that we're in is everyone is quite warming towards you. Like everyone, nobody thinks, oh, here we go.
Yeah.
Like everyone, but most people I talk to.
Do you think there may have been a change though? I think
a shift.
I think there's been a shift. There's definitely been a shift, by the way, because there are things that I do regret.
But that's why adversity I find is necessary. Is probably one of the most necessary things you can go through, because that can actually shift you. Well, hopefully in a positive way.
Yeah.
But this is not necessarily just about you, but when you do feel like you've hit rock bottom or gone to a bit of a dark place, you're naturally searching for the light.
Yeah,
something has to change.
So on reflection, the issue that I had in 19 was about the best thing that could have happened to me. So I thank every one of them, people that weren't very nice at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So if they do see this podcast, I generally am grateful.
Well,
okay.
At the time, though.
But at the time it was dark.
Is it?
Okay. I'd worked somewhere for 39 years. It's all that I knew.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything else. Right. And, and then maybe we should leave it at that, because, the outcome was really, really good.
Beautiful, yeah.
Okay. So, started working with George. The problem arose in 19. We started working together in 20. Pandemic comes along. Okay.
First.
It was absolutely, it was an interesting year. 20 was an interesting year because George started being really successful.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we worked hard together. All of us worked hard together. We were working from home. Great opportunity because we now had the big house.
And I was the boss.
And
George
was
I got to sit at the head of the table.
By the way, which maybe wasn't a bad thing.
No.
It wasn't. I don't think it was a bad thing. I think it was a good thing.
It's time,
because it equalises things, Mm-hmm. So even now I'm okay with it. I don't want to hear it all the time, but at the end of the day,
that's generally when he needs to hear it. When he doesn't want to hear it,
yeah.
What's that?
Who the boss is.
But you know what, and I'm really proud, by the way. So one of the things that I'm proud of my children, because my philosophy in life is you could only do your best. Mm-hmm. And it was my frustration of people not doing their best, maybe that I struggled with.
Yeah, it's like, come on, man.
You got to do your best, and we get things wrong. I'm sure George has done lots of wrong things in his, as my daughter has, as I have.
Yeah,
the world is not a perfect place, is it?
No, man.
So
you just got to keep falling forward, didn't you?
Yeah, I think so. And so we got together. We had a chat. Where we thought we were going to go. George was, is very driven. So
It was quite interesting
that.
because I was speaking to a friend recently about this, and when I left my previous employment, it was like there was a big elaborate scheme going on. Like we had been plotting this.
Oh yeah.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
Like, well, it felt because considering how much everything fell into place, and when I say fell into place, it was like a painful journey. It was very, very hard, but considering how many all these stars aligned, and it just and the Crown Road situation.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest with you, 20 was really interesting because what I did from being an operations director, managing lots of people, managing lots of money. All of a sudden, I became almost like an admin person again.
Yeah.
A supervisor again.
Yeah.
It went back to the roots. It went back to where I was.
So how did you find dealing with that?
I loved it.
You liked it?
I loved it.
That's like
the pressure was off a bit.
Well, it wasn't only the pressure because I'm very
back
driven.
to the roots.
Yeah.
Nostalgic.
Nostalgic.
And because I was driven, it was about what can we now make of this together.
Yeah.
But this time, by the way, it was going to be together.
Yeah.
It wasn't going to be the dad going out to work, ignoring the family. This was about how we're going to make it work together.
Yeah. Did you kind of see that as like a second chance, or if that's the right thing to say?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, do you know what? Like, it was when you see. It's quite funny because I know a lot of people that be like, I could never work with my dad, right? But when you got somebody that's got all of this experience and has got a fire in his belly, and you got this young person who's got this fire in his belly, probably different experience.
The fruit of his teeth.
I don't know what. Yeah, like you can imagine how much like.
Yeah, but it's meant it'll be silly.
Passion was
passion.
it.
Yeah,
Yo, do you know what? There was a phase where I just didn't listen to him at all. Right? I couldn't. But anyway, but regardless, but when I started listening, and I don't think it was just to my dad, but in general started listening. I didn't even realise the power, like how important it was. And I started being so receptive to what everybody was saying along the way. And I was implementing things. I was taking it on board. I was like, I think I'd definitely done myself a disservice when I was younger because I wasn't interested at school. I would just had no concentration. And I was, even at work, I mean, that I got beat into submission at work. When I first started there, I was just a typical 16-year-old. But I think through all of that as well, and listening and working hard and then combining forces with Dad.
It's powerful, man.
Yeah, it was.
One thing I've got to say about George, he is the most transformed person.
Absolutely.
I've come across, by the way.
Yeah.
From, being, 16, no motivation, right? In his own world, with his own problems, right? That maybe I, may have played a part in, or contributed in, to where he is today is just amazing.
Yeah, bro, I can say that as well because
You've said it a few times.
Yeah, the way you
and we mustn't forget his sister as well, by the way, because to be honest with you,
big up Christina.
I think we have to, because to be honest with you,
Well, say it. You gotta say it.
Big up Christina.
Yeah, big up Christina. Because in 1920, during that time, Christina came and joined the business, and my daughter's really colourful but very conscientious.
She's like
works hard, turns up for work every day.
Resilient.
She's an asset.
Very, very resilient.
And creative.
Again,
and then just to then help even more with that is we've got like such an amazing team in our business. We generally align. We're very well aligned, all of us, and we all get on.
Yeah,
the clogs.
In most ways. Oh, we've got some beeping going on.
So we're bigging up Christina because she's had her difficulties, and she's done absolutely amazing, and she's an amazing human being because sometimes you got to look beyond, you know, you got to look
The
at the human
surface.
being.
Yeah,
You got to
the
look at
surface.
the, you know,
It just
the person.
Yeah,
it-
absolutely.
Very caring. A bit like my wife. You know, my wife. You know, Christine and my son. We really absolutely care passionately.
that this is what I liked about the fact that we've created this platform here, not just for Christina or you, but specifically to give people an opportunity to tell the full story to what most people see a glimpse of.
Yeah.
Because we're so, like we were talking earlier, so judgmental about, you know, look at that person,
Yeah.
look at their disability, look at this, look at that, and we have no actual concept or idea of what they've had to go through.
Yeah.
You know,
Surface, isn't it? It's all
yeah.
very surface
So
level.
there's a lot of kind
so
of
very proud of my children.
Mm-hmm.
They've got an absolutely loving mother, by the way. Okay. Sometimes maybe struggles to deal with, you know, certain issues. Maybe not as disciplined as, you know. But my story is probably not too dissimilar to my wife's story.
Okay.
You know, immigrants. You know, difficult times, and not a lot of help. So
the hero's
you know,
journey, isn't it?
you know, it's worth just mentioning that. So 20 really interesting year. Okay, so we got on. My daughter joined us, and COVID came along. We flourished in COVID.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, we
Yeah, because
did.
the trade didn't really stop, did it? Though?
Well,
No, not in our business.
well,
we
well,
actually flourished.
the private. Do you know what? There was a big impact. The private sector definitely suffered because most people were just naturally concerned about having people around their houses.
Okay, scared.
Scared. But when you had larger organisations that are ultimately responsible for all of these properties, were thousands of properties and leaks.
Yeah, and
then-
emergencies. So what we did, George volunteered, to keep the business going
well,
for emergencies. You know, we were given.
We worked for the local council, our local council at the time, and there was other contractors that literally said, "No, sorry, we're not doing any work." I think it was probably a bit manoeuvred because maybe there was having a bit of a fallout anyway. But we actually got approached by them to say, "Look, will you help us through this pandemic?" Well, while we wanted to protect the people that were working for us as well at the same time, we didn't that was an opportunity to see.
Absolutely, yeah.
So
And I have to say that was a really interesting time for me, by the way, because as I mentioned, spending very little time with the family, COVID did, without shadow of doubt, and the business brought us so much closer together. We had a lot of time together.
Yeah.
We were fortunate in 20. We had a fantastic summer. Okay, so we loved it. It was George's 30th
yeah, I had my 30th
birthday during lockdown.
Yeah,
Lockdown 30th.
So,
Lockdown
it was quite fortunate because we have some fantastic neighbours, and we took one of the fence panels out,
Oh,
and
cool.
we
That's
were
out.
able to
Yeah.
isolate.
left it off. So
It's
like,
gone up since.
no, still
no,
not
no,
up.
yeah.
Like 2 years later,
Yeah.
we're all getting on.
But we were quite strict about not going into. We followed the rules, not unlike some of our politicians. So
Yeah,
I think,
yeah.
but
Put a table in the middle of the fence, basically, and then we'd sit.
Oh,
there.
okay, yeah.
yeah, we actually
We made the best of a bad situation.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
we
yeah.
did keep the business going because we were dealing with emergencies for our local authority, and it was a really good time for our business. It grew quite a bit.
Fantastic, man.
Okay, and it was probably so we went through COVID, and I was quite. COVID did affect me mentally, by the way. I didn't share it with people, but George will tell you I was very careful with what we did, the cleanliness. I used to wipe everything down. Honestly, I really followed what I
It
was.
goes back to the authority thing, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's normal though, I think.
And yeah, like if I was to say who followed it the most, it was.
And I got irritated
pops.
when George would come out from outside and not wash his hands properly.
Yeah.
So we had them conversations. But to be fair to George, he did, and we got through it. But come December that year, 2020, I got taken ill.
Oh.
Okay, after all that hard work,
Yeah.
I did catch COVID.
Oh,
And
pneumonia.
pneumonia.
yeah,
Oh, that's
so
strong.
basically I did suffer. So what happened? I was diagnosed with COVID on the. I probably had COVID on the 28th maybe of December, But on my birthday, I was confirmed that I had COVID. And then by, I think it was about the 2nd of January, an ambulance turned up.
Well, I mean,
yeah, George can explain, because I was beginning to get
like,
out of it, really.
So he was like, so what they essentially said is after 7 days you essentially recover. So he's been bed for 7 days. We're assuming he's going to recover, and at this point, like he's got no colour in his like face.
There's no progress.
And actually, what's actually really happening? He ain't recovering. He's deteriorating at this point.
Powerful.
So we're like in day 10, and like I'm just chilling in my room, and then you hear this bang, like, and bear in mind you've got it's like a big tiled bathroom. Dad's collapsed in the bathroom.
Oh.
So we have to try and get him to bed. Then we have to call an ambulance. Then
Yeah,
you're still delirious actually at this point.
Yeah,
so,
I mean,
so what happened was
Powerful, man.
So with pneumonia, it's help us understand what that is.
Yeah, so basically you get conjunction, conjunctions on your, when
your lungs.
Your lungs, yeah.
So it restricts your oxygen.
Okay.
So what essentially we operate somewhere around 94%, say, and Dad's was at 84%. And what was crazy was when the ambulance came, as soon as they started giving him oxygen in the house, he was slowly almost coming back into crazy. Like the realm, like, because
But no, pneumonia is powerful. It can take a lot of people, man. God forbid.
Yeah, so it was quite interesting. So just to finish the story, yes, George, you're absolutely right. About the 10th day, I thought, you know what, I should be okay now. I'm going to have a bath, and then I could...
come on.
I could just get back down to work.
It's been 10 days.
I'm not infectious anymore.
Stop being silly.
And as George said, I had a bath, get out of the bath, and I collapsed on the floor.
Oh, man.
They called the ambulance. The ambulance comes in. They put me into the... And it was probably one of the most scariest time of my life, actually, because the ambulance turns up. They take you on this... stretcher type thing. They put you in the ambulance... But they won't let any of your family come along because at the time
COVID.
People couldn't come to.
Well, I had to go to the hospital to drop loads of stuff off, and I'm waiting. You still don't know what's happening at this point, so you're in a really unknown realm, and it was all surreal. But I was downstairs in the hospital, waiting for them to take the stuff, and this guy comes rushing in, and he's like, "Oh, my dad's just died."
Oh.
So I'm thinking, this is like, I don't even want to be here right now. It's like you have no control of what's going to happen next. So, but anyway, you give the stuff, you go home.
And just to finish a little bit, because it was quite interesting, really, and it's worth talking about as well. By the way, I think people do need to know this. So ended up in hospital. They didn't have enough beds in the wards at the time. They put you in a corridor. They started feeding you oxygen. The first doctor came along, and he said to me that I'm not sure what's going to happen. And he was quite negative, if I'm honest with you.
Yeah,
it was quite negative. He said, what we'll do, we'll give you some oxygen, but if it doesn't work, you might have to go in intensive care, and I'm not sure what might happen.
Yeah,
because with intensive care, were they putting people like in a coma, induced coma?
I mean, it was various things. They were doing induced coma. They were giving them lots of oxygen. They were giving them one-to-one care. They were really doing their best to manage it. But 2 or 3 hours. So went into hospital. They started giving you drugs and injections. I remember an injection in my tummy because at the time they were worried about blood clots and stuff like that. 2 or 3 hours later, another doctor came along, a female doctor, and she said to me, "Oh, how are you doing?" I said, "The oxygen is helping me." And she said, "Yeah, don't worry." She said, "We're going to have you out of here in 7 days." So I went from
you don't know what's going to happen
to, "Oh, by the way, I'm going to be all right."
Yeah, result.
But now they're trying to kick you out.
Yeah, but the point that I was making, and I wanted to really, really emphasise, in that time, you don't really think about yourself.
No.
Your mind is thinking about your family. It's thinking about everybody else.
Yeah.
While they're in pain, thinking about what's happening to
you. It's like
you.
You're connected. Like
I don't even know if I was in pain. I think I was more like it was a bit of a numbing feeling. It's like I don't think you really comprehend it. And the best. I think I've always lived by being optimistic anyway.
Yeah.
So I ain't going to assume the worst. I'm always going to try to assume the best, because I'd rather send out that energy that hopefully, so like, you know,
absolutely,
so I ended up in the coronavirus ward. There were people that really weren't well, an elderly chap that passed away, but I could feel myself
recovering,
getting stronger. It was difficult because, I mean, for a number of days I used to take an oxygen tank into the loo, so it was quite serious. So anybody that didn't believe in what COVID could do to you,
it was strong.
I mean, I can definitely vouch.
It's legit.
I mean, I was in a bad state. Anyway, they fixed me, and approximately a week later, I went back home, feeling very tired, lethargic, but very quickly,
recovered.
We recovered.
Nice.
And this was 21.
He said, I ain't done you just
I
yet.
ain't done yet. I wasn't done yet.
Yeah.
And, we carried on working together, and we got more opportunities, and we've been growing the firm now. We rented the premises that we originally worked in. So George can explain.
This is a full round circle for me. So started at Limbrooks. Limbrooks was in Crown Road. Waits took over Limbrooks, so they temporarily also was in Crown Road. Waits departed. We were doing well. Opportunity presents itself at Crown Road, exactly the same place where I've worked since I was 16 years old.
Yeah, that's canny, isn't it?
Bang, we're now in Crown Road.
Yeah, and we've been there since 21. We moved in 21. So the firm had grown the firm has grown exponentially again. Yeah, we're doing a great job. We could do better. COVID definitely had an impact in the in our market. I think quality of staff has become a little bit more difficult.
Inflation,
but you know what, we are working really, really hard. We're selling the family business. We've learned our lessons. We know, I think we've improved massively from a behaviour point of view. I think we're going to go places.
Absolutely.
And
he doesn't think.
Yeah.
No, we are going to go places, and I think the whole business believes in customer service.
But I think as well, like and God willing we do. But it was an opportunity to create a good working environment, learn from what anything that we might have gone through, but create something a bit different for people, because unless we have done a really good job of convincing our team, like they are really bought into what's happening, like, and in 2023 you don't do that without being a really good employer.
You're not just gonna wing it, like,
and you even met half of the team when we went out. Like, so it's all about reciprocation. Always about reciprocation. Never feeling like somebody is, I think in Dad's world it was, there was a lot of promises, and I'm not sure how many were delivered, not delivered. But actually, do you know what? Like, my view is that there is enough food on the table for everybody to eat.
Yep.
You just have to be responsible in doing it to protect the ultimate thing that is giving not one person an opportunity at this point, but there's probably about 130 people involved in Prestige's activity. So you're not just responsible for...
Yes, it's
now about everybody.
Yeah,
and even though we have got a way to go, our real focus is customer service. That is what we really believe in.
Yeah.
So irrespective of the passion, the drive, it's all about... It's about the customer, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because...
Well, and that was one thing we was always good at is being of service, because I always used to say to Dad, I used to listen to a lot of people like Gary Vee when I was younger, and you provide a good service and the byproduct is you make money.
You get success.
Yeah, you never, I've got to be careful, I don't want to give away all the key secrets here, but essentially...
Save that for the book.
Yeah, save that for the book. But essentially, delivering a good service comes before anything else.
Yeah.
And then after that, the rest come after, the, you know, making sure people are safe, making sure you're
and
making money.
And you've got to believe it. You know, and you've got to believe it, by the way. So, you know, because it's not, you know, because we never really talk about the money in our business. That is not the priority.
It's not the main driver.
The priority is delivering
a good service,
a really good service.
Yeah, and it's key, isn't it? It's the same.
And it won't change. No matter, you know, we're looking to grow the business to, you know, 20, 30 million. You know, we are definitely on this journey, and hopefully, you know, I'll be, you know, well enough, strong enough to be around for a long time, and that is my aim. I'm certainly driven now, so, you know.
For anyone that don't know,
stopped.
Yeah, for anyone, how old, and just tell.
Yeah, I mean, I'm 66 years old. I'm 67 this year, so you know. But I've got tremendous drive. We've got a tremendous team, and we will deliver what we say that we, you know, that we will. So, you know, for me, the future's looking, you know, very, very bright, and we will care about the people that we employ. We will care about, you know, making sure that they have, as George said, a fair deal. But they need to buy into this, into our ethos. They need to buy into what, you know, the culture that we're trying to create. You know, customer service, deliver the best you can, and be conscientious. And we think we can deliver.
So important.
Yeah,
so important, and that's why you're already successful, and you're going to be even more successful, man. Because, you know, that's the purpose, isn't it? It's the aim.
Yeah.
So, and it's an important one.
I mean, I don't know whether, you know, there was so much more we could have actually, you know, spoken about, and, you know, because there was a lot more in, you know, in my childhood that people would have found quite tough.
Well, don't worry,
we'll have to do a part 2.
Yeah.
Well, you know, there was just so much more to talk about, but and, you know, as I said before, before this sort of podcast, I did say that, you know, we're talking about going back over 60 years. So, you know, and sometimes you got, and as we talk, you remember things, and as I'm sitting here talking,
years in like an hour and a half, it's like,
you know,
and to be fair, exactly an hour and a half. You're probably the longest guest that we've actually had on.
But that's 60 years.
Hour and 40 minutes.
Are you serious? I thought we've only done
20 minutes.
So
you shouldn't have done that.
No. Like, it's flowing. No.
Okay, but you know what? I've really enjoyed it.
No, same,
and
John.
you know,
and hopefully people can you know, read through your story and think, you know, what can I take from this that might help them excel in life, that they might want to do differently.
And I hope so, by the way, because, you know, I mean, this podcast today is not about me. It's not about telling. It's about how you tell a story for others.
Yes.
To maybe
pass something on.
I think it's great, and thank you for sharing your story, and it's an amazing one.
It.
I love the way it's all gone around in a circle, and how the past is now impacting the present. And you know, and it's just phenomenal, man.
Yeah.
So what would be your greatest advice for someone who's listening?
So for me, get that work-life balance right. So work hard, be conscientious. Nobody gives you something for nothing. And here we are today, living in a world maybe that slightly resembles the 60s, only slightly, because we didn't have social housing the way that it is today. It was market rents, very, very unscrupulous landlords. So I would say today is probably gone back a few years. Cost of living, a big issue. But, you know, when Marcus Rashford, the footballer, talks about, you know, free school meals, that was my world.
Wow, yeah.
But let's all work hard to try and get out of it. Because, you know, with equal opportunities today, with diversity today, all I say to everybody listening, work hard, get out of it. It's not easy,
but it's possible.
But it's possible.
Thank you, John. Absolutely
Yeah.
amazing.
Thanks,
You're
thanks
welcome.
for coming
Thank
on
you,
today.
George.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Oh, God
You're
bless.
welcome,
God
welcome.
bless us all.
Cheers.
Okay, thank you, and have a great evening, everybody.